back to the class, everyone. Today, I want to take a look at all the character releases that we've gotten over the last couple of months and put them in a simple, prioritized order to help give everyone out their guidance as to what they should be working on right now. And as general, we'll go ahead and throw the caveat out there that all of these things are somewhat good. And at the end of the day, you have to do what is best for your roster by analyzing what you've already worked on, what you enjoy, and what you like. But moving forward, this is all based off of a general opinion of what we've seen so far and what we've been told what these characters will be doing in the near future. So again, 10 most recent releases of characters and where kind of they fit and what they need to be able to live up to their full potential. So we're going to be starting at the very bottom, if you couldn't tell by the characters we already have in front of us. And again, as previously mentioned, all these things are good. I just don't see a lot coming from these bottom two. So coming in dead last, 10th place, is going to be Saw Gerrera and his team. Obviously, Saw himself is required for Cal. It's not really what we're talking about. We're more so talking about building up specifically his team, taking them to relics, using them in GAC, using them in other game modes. And I just don't really have anything nice to say. I mean, he has a TB mission that apparently is actually really hard and not super accessible, even if you do have everyone high and relic up. There's a very specific strategy. It's not just free money. The overall characters that are needed in it also just aren't very convenient for most players. Obviously, you have Biggs and Wedge from the Jedi Master loot farm, assuming you've done that by now. But I still haven't taken up Baze and Chirrut. I guess I recently gear 12 Chirrut with a lot of the gear changes, but they're just not common characters that a lot of us have on hand. And even if you do build everyone up, they're not doing magnificent things. They have some help of current datacrons, and that's great. But, I mean, that's just not relevant for a long prioritization, especially when you consider what are some of the teams that are beating them or what has a higher priority that we're going to see later on in the video. Remember, we have had a Galactic Legend and a Galactic Legend fleet in the last couple months, so big spoiler there for that one. Next up is going to be TW's Fun, aka the new Dark Trooper Moff Gideon. And you may be asking, all right, Calvin, why is this even in here? Conquest isn't going to be really done for the next 3 months before we're going to unlock the character, and let's be honest, the Conquest is kind of a dumpster fire right now anyways. So all that's true, but at the same time, there's other characters in the team that you could already start working on to be prepared as soon as he hits. We did this with Taron Malicos very well, and it ended up having really big payoffs. The reason why this one's falling so low is essentially for two reasons. Number one, it is currently outfitted to be specifically for TW because he has TW Omicrons and all that stuff. I'm not really that big of a fan of TW, and even if I was, there is a pretty big problem here with Moff Gideon, and that is the board isn't getting smaller. So a lot of the really advanced rosters that are going to be unlocking him day one are going to have the 7 or 8 Galactic Legends. They're already going to have the really big TW killing machines like Dadbod Boba and Juhanikron. So even if you can get the whole thing worked out, the odds of you being in a guild that wants you to and needs you to are very low, leaving it at a very low priority. The other reason that I was going to mention is the fact that you can't actually build, and they address this, you can't build 3 trooper teams in TW or GAC with the current splits. We don't have enough troopers, and I would love more than anyone to get the Incinerator Trooper, but right now we don't have him. So you either have to make an Iden and Veers or a Veers and Moff Gideon, or I guess you could make a Moff Gideon and Iden team, but anyways. So those two are going to be at kind of the bottom of the barrel. Next up is going to be the Wookiee team. I actually like the Wookiee team quite a lot. It has a lot of good functionality in GAC, specifically 3v3, but also 5v5. It is also needed for the Conquest, so it does have a little bit more to offer than the previous two teams, but it really kind of suffers in one big way, and that's you don't really get a lot of the characters to relics naturally, and that's going to be a big difference between what we're going to see later on in the video. You get Veteran Smuggler Chewbacca if you have Raid Relic 3, which is already kind of a low investment, I guess. And then most of the rest of the team you're stuck with is going to be at Gear 12 or below, and I guess you could swap out Clone Wars Chewie for someone else, like maybe Vet Han or something, but overall, you're stuck with a kind of a team that you haven't already invested in, and you need to invest a lot in it to get it to be somewhat good. And for me, my personal roster, I'm just not going to do it. The Datacron is going to go away in a month or two, and I don't really want to relic up the whole team just for 2 months worth of stuff. And again, while it might last longer for you without a Datacron, depending on where you're at in GAC, a lot of the teams above this are going to have longer lasting stay than this one is. So don't really hate Tarful. He just doesn't land super high on the priority for list for me. Next up is going to be the Sorty team. And more accurately, I know Sorty isn't a recent release, but Lobot is a recent rework, and there's been more motivation than ever to build up this droid team. So it's going to fall into the next. And one of the reasons why I do like it, and this is very different from the previous Wookiee team, it is just kind of requirement city. You need Sorty at Relic 5 for Leviathan, assuming you've gone after that. Relic 7 BB-8 for Galactic Legend Ray. Relic 7 or 8 R2-D2, depending on what you're going after. Heck, even T3 is technically required for Revan, while not required at Relics. And then Lobot as well for the new Leia. So you get almost entirely a team, regardless of what your long-term goal is. You're going to have a piece towards that. And the Sorty team defensively isn't terrible. It is pretty good. It's not shining too bright right now just because there aren't any droid datacrons out there. But overall, it does offer some nice functionality. It also gives a lot of really good buffs that are helpful in going through Conquest. So kind of has an added factor similar to the Wookiee faction. So overall, we like it. But more importantly, it is a really important stepping stone to other things later on, which when we comes to roster building, that is one of the most important factors. Not just what can the squad do, but what does the squad lead to. Next up is going to be Cal, and Cal, I like him a lot. We're going after him right now, but in the grand scheme of things, when you start to compare him to things like Leia and Leviathan, who, spoiler alert, are going to be at the very end of the video, he's not as great as they are. Number one, he's okay in GAC. He actually unlocks one really cool counter, and that's using pretty much any Jedi team ever, including Jedi Revan or Jedi Luke, beating Malicos. That's probably his most attractive point from a PvP perspective. And while that does add value, that's like one data point of one thing he can do. He's also very important for TB, but I don't even know how many people are currently doing that and or going after that. I know that my guild, I think we're at 500 million or something like that for GP. It's not on the radar. We are laser focused on everyone getting Leia, getting her up, making sure that we can participate in the new raid to a good extent so that we can keep getting those good resources at it guild wide. And again, not to say that the Zephyr rewards or anything like that are bad, but it's just something that can really be left on the back burner that doesn't fall very high on the prioritization list. So again, good character, but he has a small impact on the grand scheme of things of you doing a little bit better in territory battles and unlocking essentially one or two more counters in GAC. I guess he also does with Jedi Knight Revan and Jedi Knight Luke beat JMK, which is kind of a bigger deal. Next up are going to be the Night Sisters, and this is really where we start to see high payoffs. Everything from up here should be high priority, assuming that you can. I realize we have limited resources. That's the whole reason why we're making a prioritization video. But next up is going to be Night Sisters. Night Sisters, gosh, are they fun, and they kill some high-level stuff, or at least get you really close to killing that high-level thing, specifically Jabba. They're also being important to take apart other teams. We recently used it against the C Malak team, and if I had not misplayed it and kept hitting Malak very unnecessarily when we could have just hit C because we already wiped off his deception through dying, we could have taken him out. So they're very powerful. They can do a lot of things. The only reason they're not higher up on the list is because not all of them are requirements. In fact, only one of them is required at Relics for one thing. And on top of that, they're heavy in the ability mat area, and I realize you don't need both Omicrons that I have, and you probably also don't need, what is this, 4, 5, 6 Zetas that I also have, but they like a lot of those. They like to have at least the Marincron for the Omicron, and you do need about 3 or 4, maybe even 5 Zetas to get the team really functional to the point where it's being that high tier stuff that you invested into it for that reason to begin with. So good, but they are high investment, they're high payoff, so they're good in that regard. But again, that's really the biggest contrast with them and the Phoenix team above them. The Phoenix team are doing very nice things in JC or in Conquest right now, which are very important for a lot of people who are trying to build up their roster. But more importantly than that, you also already have one of them, or actually two of them, required at Relics for 2 different things. And then on top of that, the overall investment is just lower. The Omicron is pretty comparable to one of the Omicrons below, but it's still 1 instead of 2. And then the Zeta count, I mean, you only really need these 3 to get the team killing everything it needs to be, which again is a fraction of what we have down below. And most people have Phoenix built to some extent. I've actually noticed a lot of newer mid-game accounts haven't even really touched Night Sisters because before Marin, they weren't really that all important. and you needed Phoenix, at least to some extent, to get Thrawn, and a lot of people had already gotten them up to at least gear 12 or low relic levels due to their functionality in fleet. While I don't think that was a huge bang for their buck, it definitely is now. And adding Captain Rex, even at a gear 11, can yield some really good benefits depending on where you're at from a PvP perspective. So definitely going to land very high on the list. I believe we're currently at 4, and oh no, yeah, there is one more. So this one gets a really big caveat. I was originally going to put Taron Malicos in the UFU team way lower on the list because they're GAC and they are amazing in GAC. It is going to be one of the best defensive comps coming into the next couple months, and that says a great deal of things. Well, I love Phoenix and I love Night Sisters. They kill some really high level stuff on offense. They don't hold terribly well on defense, and I know everybody has screenshots of like 11 holds or whatever, but when we actually go into the data and see what is countering them and what is countering them well, it's not nearly as impressive as what it's taking to kill Taron and Seer once you give the team everything that it needs. The biggest caveat with them is that they're really not that great outside of GAC. The team functions very well off of at least 3 GAC Omicrons. You start to take those away, they just like die to Bad Batch or trooper, maybe not troopers, but bounty hunters or something of the sort, something much lower on the pay scale, where right now the only thing that is successfully beating them consistently is Malgus. We've had lots of reports of Traya or Starkiller or Gas that are very so-so as far as overall results go. But for the most part, it's just a hefty defensive team right now that, for me, I prioritized it heavily, and it really paid off in this last 5v5 season. We ended up with overall winning record. Next up is going to be Leia. We're finally in the number 2 slot for something that needs to be prioritized. And I will say, in the similar sense that the below team has the caveat for GAC, this one has a really big caveat for the raid. And Leia is good, she's great, she's going to be good in all the game modes for all the time. I'm sure she's going to have other events and whatnot, but she's also the heaviest investment out of anything here. And that's just because she's a galactic legend. That's normal. They always have 15 requirements. They always have high relics in there. It's a part of the process. But that being said, if your guild is nowhere near the raid, like at all, they're not going to push for it, it's not going to be a deal, you might prioritize, 1, 2, 3, maybe even Cal over her, just because you'll already start to be getting these building blocks into your team, and then by the time you're done with Captain Rex, and then by the time that you're done with Marin, you can start going after some of these other characters that take longer and more time to build, and you've already gotten a lot of payoff from getting the typically lower priority teams. But if your guild has any intentions at going ham on the raid, you need Leia. The raid is only open for, I believe, 9 months at a time. After that, it's going to close and then move on to the next thing. And if you weren't getting the resources to keep growing your roster in those 9 months, you're going to suffer a lot in the long term, and so is your guild. So, be a contributor. Again, if you're not even close to it, then kind of ignore it, and she falls a little bit lower down the line. She's still a galactic legend, so still very good, but you can get some cheaper teams for similar-ish value in other game modes. And finally, the one that has no caveats and is just stupid good and needs to be at the top of the list for pretty much everyone out there, even if you hate fleets, it is going to be Leviathan. So I realize this is a squad right now. This isn't actually ships in there, but these 5 characters essentially are going to represent the Leviathan fleet. It, for a lot of reasons, it has to be at the top. Number 1, it is your crystal income in the game. It's the lifeblood of how you get crystals so that you can use refreshes, so you can grow, so you can keep getting a larger and larger roster to be able to get more revenue sources within the game and just max out your account. 2 big things. Number 1, this is Fleet Arena. This is how you not only get to the top, but the quality of life so that you stay at the top and you don't have to spend a lot of time getting back up there and becoming frustrated with yourself. Number 2, GAC. There are people, I saw this on servers just this last week, as high as Kyber 2 are leaving Leviathan and one other fleet on defense and just flat out destroying people because they have nothing that can counter right now. Because the only 2 things that really reliably will counter it is A, the mirror, so your opponent has to have it too, and B is the super empire comp that requires you to smush together a counter that can beat Profundity and a counter that can beat Executor, and then on top of that, it's just expensive to begin with. It requires 2 conquest ships that if you haven't been playing the game for a very long time, you've been totally closed out of because Proving Grounds isn't the best design in the world. So it's the number 1 priority: crystal income, quality of life, multiple game modes, and I guess we could even topple on top of all the rest of that, these characters aren't bad on the ground. Like Darth Revan and Malgus, oh, awesome. Even without TW Omicrons, they do fairly well in TW, and they do, I mean, they're one of the best teams in GAC. The whole reason, the whole perk that we gave to Cal earlier was the fact that he can beat the Malgus team, so the Malgus team must be worth something if that was the perk to him to begin with. So that is going to be our prioritization for the last 10 things that we've gotten. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you're prioritizing. I know there's some different rosters out there that for whatever reason developed other characters along the way, and it makes more sense to kind of shift things around, but for the most part this was aimed to be general. So thank you guys for watching, and as always, stay awesome.